Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that encourages discussion in our community on today's local and global issues. Now your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, author, professor, and nationally known sports economist, Dr. Kevin Quinn.
Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. I'm Kevin Quinn. Our special guest is Victor Ochen, who's been influential in sustainable peace around the world. Ochen founded the African Youth Initiative Network to aid the healing of trauma and to promote youth leadership. Both he and the network have been nominated for the 2015 Nobel Peace Prize by the American Friends of Service Committee. Victor, welcome to the program.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Well, it's my honor. I don't think we've had a Nobel Prize nominee here before. I'll ask about that in a moment, but first, you're from Uganda.
Yes, I'm from Uganda.
And you are the first person to be nominated for the prize from that country, is that right?
Yeah, from Uganda. I'm the first Ugandan to be nominated, and also they said I'm the youngest African to be nominated.
Really? That's quite impressive.
Yeah,
well,
it's good.
Americans tend to focus on what's right in front of us right now, and I think that there's some understanding about the time when Idi Amin was the leader there. But help us understand a little bit about the history of the country, going back to British colonialism.
Yeah, Uganda this year, actually on the 9th of October, which is incidentally the day they will announce the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Oh.
What a coincidence. It will be celebrating the 53rd independence. And since the independence, it's a country that has been struggling with their own history of human rights. And it's a country that has never seen any peaceful political transition. It's been all military coups of another and another. And it's a country that has seen many, many layers of conflict transformed from one to another. And it's been quite difficult. So myself, like you said it very well, I was born in 1981, which Idi Amin was deposed of power in 1979. In my country, that was a period when the country was going through layers of conflict and all that. So my history pretty much represents the majority of the Ugandan population who have been through different layers of conflict. And myself, being born in that period of time, I was raised in conflict. I was born in conflict, raised in conflict, survived conflict. And myself, I thought I would never make it, but I'm happy that I made it. So, yeah.
Your story is a remarkable one. You said you were born in 1981, and
Yes.
you were raised in the northern part of the country. Is that
correct?
correct?
I was born in Lira. I was on the 16th of September. Actually, 16 is my lucky number also, and September is my lucky month. So it's when I was born in 1981. In that part of the community, shortly, there were all sorts of rebellions going on. The present government was also in the bush fighting to take on the power. And there were Idi Amin's eras of, fighters were also still fighting to regain power and all these kind of things. And then it became a bit of trend of life because on the peak of war, when you have like several conflicts going on, it's difficult to survive. It's difficult to imagine who lives where, who is the right person, because you don't know who is really the right government you should trust, who is the right fighter groups you should trust, and all those kind of things. And then it became very difficult, like for many other kids, including myself. It was quite a tragic experience for a child born around that period of time to survive from, lack of food, to malnutrition, to diseases, to being abducted, to being shot, to being abandoned, to being burnt in their houses. These are the kind of experience that majority of the young people in that period of time went through. And the worst of all has been northern Uganda. It's been a place that has known no peace. It's been through over war. And it's been so tragic in a way that the war targeted that, taking on young people to be part of the armed combatants, both by then those who are fighting to take over the power and also different other level groups. So it's been like a struggle that we had to go through throughout the life, throughout our childhood. Myself, I spent 20 years of my lifetime. I'm currently 34 years. I spent 20 years of my time in conflict. And I like any other kids, I spent like over 7 years surviving on one meal a day. And I had to face off with a lot of challenges, from malnutrition to, to diseases, to struggling with my own education. I never thought I would be able to be speaking in a powerful place like this place today. And I'm very grateful that I lived to see what my, what my situation could have avoided me, prevented me from seeing it, but I think I am happy that I made it, because it's been a life of struggle, a childhood full of fatigue, of suffering and despair and woe and survivals, struggling for survival. This has been my history as a child.
I mean, it's Uganda is in a very difficult neighborhood. I mean, it
Yes.
borders the Congo,
Yeah.
South Sudan, one of the newest countries of the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
Rwanda, Tanzania,
Yeah. And Kenya, yes.
and Kenya. It does border on Lake Victoria, right?
Very beautiful lake, and fortunately, Uganda is considered the pearl of Africa, and meaning almost whatever you find in Africa is in Uganda. All of them, from a bit of cold weather to hot desert. Also, we have a history of dictatorship. We have produced probably the worst dictators in Africa. One of the worst, Idi Amin being one of them. And I think also the country that is quite rich is one of the greenest African countries. Is a country that you don't need irrigation to grow. It's so fertile, so rich. We are the source of Nile, the Nile that waters and feeds the entire stretch to North Africa, to Mediterranean. We have River Nile that starts from Uganda, and also it's quite rich in the deep culture, rich in nature, and everything is quite good. Although there are also a lot of challenges like many other African countries. But the biggest problem of Uganda has been governance, has been leadership. Leadership has been a problem to Ugandans. And that has been a challenge that we are struggling as a country to get into the governance that look at leadership that benefits all.
Well, one of the things I found out when I was doing some research for this is that Uganda is a very diverse country, ethnically,
Yeah.
culturally. I think the largest ethnic group is maybe a fifth of the country, isn't that?
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it,
true.
right?
That's true. We have quite a number of different ethnic languages also spoken, but also culturally we're quite rich. I would say, to me, it wouldn't have been a problem to have different culture. It would have been a beauty to have like diversity of ethnicity and all that. But the politicians use that as opportunity to divide and rule. We have a country that's picked itself from a very different history, difficult history of divide and rule. When the colonists came, they divided the country into regions, putting each regions against each other, of which it would have been opportunity for our governments, our politicians, to embrace this and change the trend of the episodes that we've been having. If they pick the country, embrace the country, and change the prospect for leadership of inclusion as opposed to leadership of division. But I think the problem has been the leadership came in power and embraced the colonial legacies of divide and rule. And you find that as opposed to sharing the national resources, most of the government came in and favored their own people. And it's still a challenge we're having up to now. We have a country that still struggles to include themselves, to bring on board every other ethnic communities. And that's what we really have to work on. The generation that is caught up in the feeling of we have suffered because of them. This is applicable across the region. And that's right. Even right now, we are trying to work on how can we bridge the gap, how can we address the history, break on the cycles of the legacies that we've been sustaining, we've been seeing for too long. So that's why we are saying that it's best when you need change, we need to look up to the young generation.
The young generation, yes, we old folks like to complain about young people, but actually what we do is pass on messes that we've created and inherited and hope that the next generation can fix them.
Yeah.
So when you look across Africa, are there success stories that you think Uganda should model themselves against?
Yeah, I think in so many ways, like any other African countries, Uganda has struggled with with its own history, picking from the colonial time. But I think some of the African countries have managed to move on. We're also not so badly off as it might sound like, but I think we have few challenges in the country, like the issues of governance, still a big challenge. We need to reach a point where we can transition politically and peacefully. That's where we have to. We have the entire country struggling to embrace the reality of peace. We need to live. We have a very beautiful, well-written constitution, and we have seen each and every constitutional amendment that has taken place has always maintained very clearly, vividly, the issues of equality, justice, peace, freedom. Where is the independence we claim if majority of the population doesn't feel free? We need to reach a point where, as a country, we can move on, we can step up, we can be part of the global change, we can learn from our neighboring countries. Africa is struggling, but also we have moved on as a continent. We need to still learn from neighboring countries. South Africa has probably emerged stronger. From the apartheid era, they emerged strongest. And also, We have also other challenges still, although in South Africa, the issues of inclusion, equality, and all that still comes and exists a lot. But as a country, I think Uganda can learn more from the neighboring countries in order to move on. We also play a greater role in the Great Lakes region. Uganda plays a greater role in peace and stability in South Sudan, in Somalia, in Central African Republic. We are militarily active in all those countries, trying to create peace and stability in Somalia, which is a good contribution. I think we need to be part of the continental effort for peace and stability, but let us also be part of the continental effort in taking lead in advocating for peaceful and democratic transition in the country.
The Lord's Resistance Army was sort of the fighting the Ugandan government. Military was the defining conflict, I think, of your youth. Tell us a little bit about what that was about.
The Lord's Resistance Army came to start fighting the current government as soon as they took over power in 1986. And the war, like any other, there's been a lot of divide in the regions, and the war, like any other wars, could have been meaningful if it was targeting government. But the LRA instead focused at attacking the local population, abducting children, recruiting them into the armed forces, burning their houses. And then you ask, what kind of war is this? The war that targets not at the army barracks, but targets at the local population. And of course, as people who suffered, I was there. I suffered, I witnessed the LRA atrocities when I was a child. I survived on many occasions. There are many occasions when we survived on landmines. We were walking on the road and the friends in front of you got blown up by landmines. This is how narrow you can survive. There are moments when I spent my entire childhood sleeping in the bush every day, running from abduction, from captivity, from all these kind of abuses. And I grew up seeing my age mates being taken and being killed. Some of them were, out of frustration, got abducted, got abducted, volunteered themselves to be abducted because they didn't see much hope at home. And that's what we're thinking. Why are we allowed to suffer like this? Where is the international communities? Where is the government? I think the LRA war intensified because I thought the government probably could have imagined that this is a small war that was going to end soon, but nothing much was done to protect the civilian population. The responsibility to protect was lacking from the government side. International communities, we wondered why it took so long for the international communities to know that millions of people were suffering, were caught up in tragic situation in northern Uganda. This became very difficult. And the war intensified to over close to 3 million people were displaced, including myself. I grew up in the refugee camp, in the IDP camp in northern Uganda. And with all the hardships, it was difficult to imagine something good coming out of that. I lost the family members, myself. I struggled with all my childhood as a kid struggling to study. Things like this became very real, very difficult, very problematic. And it intensified over and over when we had tens of thousands of people, young children, got abducted and recruited as child soldiers. And that's when the international community started realizing. So the war took too long. The LRA war took too long. It became so young because it focused more at taking young people. It became very complicated in terms of how do we intervene. And we were wondering, if the war happens for one day, you might wonder the government is struggling to respond. The intelligence was taken unaware. If the war take another week, you would say they're gathering the process of getting to respond, to protect. But if the war take a year, you start questioning.
Wow, I was a young person when that was going on.
Yeah.
And what I remember in my own experience was that the thing that defined the world was the beginning and the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And at least here in the US, and I think in Europe too, most of everything we saw with respect to that was it the Soviet Union led or the US led, and it really was neither. And so I think for a lot of folks that wasn't as important at the time. Now a few years later, of course, that became very different. And we sort of thought that, oh wow, these conflicts had come to an end. Of course they have not come to an end. I mean, they continue. In the early 90s, there were in the mid 90s, Somalia caught at least American attention. But it wasn't until, I think a few years ago, there was a YouTube video about Joseph Kony
yes.
that caught the attention of a lot of young people.
The Kony 2012.
Right. And so from your perspective, how did you react to that when that video came out and all of a sudden the world was paying attention?
The video came in 2011 with the purpose of creating an awareness that Connie should be arrested by 2012, which certainly, probably the context, the concept to which it was conceived was to create awareness about this guy so that he's apprehended, he's arrested, and the people suffering are addressed and all that.
Right, and he was the leader of the LRA,
yeah,
right?
The leader of the LRA. And the war took so long, and so many nasty incidences happened many, many years ago. And I think so many stories have not been told to the whole world. And people also moved on their own to transition. So when the video came, it came in at a time when the picture in the video was not depicting the reality on the ground. It was what we consider using the whole story, using the whole series to tell the new story, which was completely misleading and was wrong. And when the video came, I took my time. I watched it 4 times before I could make my own input. And I saw it was not okay because it didn't reflect the reality. It didn't reflect what was going on in the community. Although the intention seems to be good, that it was to create awareness about the suffering of the people, but it missed the point in terms of whose interest was being amplified in the movie. Was it about the people's voice coming forward, or was it about the movie creators' voices being promoted and all that? So when the movie came in, it got global attention. It was put at a restricted access where the majority of the people in northern Uganda wouldn't do that. They put it on YouTube, they kept it on the internet, which didn't reach majority of the people who didn't have even electricity. Most of them, the victims doesn't have electricity, don't have internet, they don't know YouTube and all this kind of thing. So it was restricted to a particular audience. So that's what they did. But the packaging of the movie, first of all, from my own side, I think it was wrong to give, more prominence to the perpetrator who has done worst atrocities, who has killed many people, to whom the victims feel his name alone sounds tragedy. And I think it was more to give prominence and to the perpetrators as opposed to the victims. It was completely dismissive of the victim situation. And then, if the movie was packaged in a way that was intended to amplify the voice of the people, that could have been okay. But it was done more to amplify the voices around around the perpetrators. And to us, we thought the best could have been in whose interest, who deserves more attention right now? Is it the perpetrator that has been raping, killing people, all these kind of things, or is the victims that should be given more attention? And then the way the story was told, it was not okay. It was not accurate in a way that the footages used were footages for many years. And you don't want to use the whole footages to tell the new story. People have moved on. People have emerged stronger, and they continue. And of course, Connie was no longer in Uganda. But the movie put it that Connie was in Uganda. It also had a lot of commercial interest. I think so. It had so much commercial interest. But at the end of the day, the most annoying thing was, I think it was not done with all the trauma sensitivity in mind when they're doing it for the victims. You want to tell the stories properly. Victims have lost it all. Myself, I struggle to emerge to be able to be here. But majority of the community lost it all. And all they are left with is their story. If you're telling it, it has to be told accurately. If you tell it wrongly, it hurts them. It doesn't work well at all. So the movie came in. I think it was designed for a particular audience, American audience, primarily to raise resources, which is the resources in whose interest, for whose benefit was the resources. Was it going to benefit the people, or it was going to benefit the movie organizer, the campaigners? And we're saying it's good to raise awareness and attract solidarity, but it has to be told accurately. If things are done in a way that benefits the local population, it's helpful. But if it's done in a way that benefits the campaigners, let us give prominence to the people, to the victims. Let's recognize the suffering of the people, as opposed to glorification. And also one tragic thing which was so real was, we didn't want to be caught up in a situation where You use the campaign, make him famous, make Connie famous. The word famous is not okay. Because we are dealing with a society, a population that feels they have lost it all. Their entire history is gone. Their entire life may never be recovered. And all they're left with their stories and their pains. And if you want to send a message to the child who never had opportunity to study that, you can as well be famous by raping people, killing people, abducting, destroying. You can also be famous. I think that sends a very wrong message to the young generation. Remember, we have a generation that has lost it all. All they learned is they were tortured, they were beaten, they were made to kill their own families, they were made to rape their own sisters, their own parents, and they are all struggling with their own acceptance. And they think they don't count in the society. But you don't want to tell them that you can as well be famous.
So let's talk about your story, which is a little more positive, I think.
Yeah.
So here you are, you're in one of these IDP, internally displaced person
Yes,
camp, right?
yes.
And there are hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people that are in this situation. And you're a kid.
Yeah.
How do you get from where you were there to, well, you spoke recently at the UN. You've been named an ambassador from one of the Sustainable Development goals that the UN has for 2030, I think.
Yeah.
You're nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. How does that happen? How did you get here?
Yeah, that's the question. Sometimes I also ask myself, how did I get to where I am? But I think I had a very powerful history. And my world was so clouded with pains and losses and suffering and all that. I think to even take it a little bit back, I reflect a lot on when I was in the camp, when we were struggling with what to eat, when I was sleeping without bed sheets, when we were sleeping in the bush, and when we were struggling with what to eat, with all the diseases and sufferings and all those things. I suffered from all sorts of diseases, from malaria, live alone scabies, skin infections, live alone all sorts of, meningitis. I survived meningitis without treatment, and I suffered to the point that I don't get any malaria anymore. I developed immunity because I suffered too much that I could ill without any treatment. And right now,
you must have a very strong constitution. I get the sniffles, I'm down for a week.
No, that's a problem. So all these kind of things made it very difficult. And also, even on the peak of war, when all schools were burnt down, teachers were abducted, some were killed and all those things, I still picked up myself to say, I want to study. And above all, when I saw my age mates voluntarily going to be recruited, young as they were, to either be auxiliary forces, like to protect the community home guards, or were voluntarily getting abducted, I knew this is where we are going to miss out. And my first move was to form the Peace Club in the camp.
The Peace Club in the camp? Wow.
And the Peace Club I formed in the camp was to help me mobilize and discourage young people from being recruited to armed forces. And then I just realized some of the young people were being recruited not because they wanted to, but because they felt they had lost it all and they were never going to regain anything. And what was so disturbing was majority of them didn't even have clothing to wear, including myself. The only clothing they wanted to was to go and be recruited into armed forces and get military uniforms. This was one of the inspirations.
Because it looked like a better life than the one that they were having, right?
Yeah. And some of them had to voluntarily go back to captivity because they felt life in the camp was worse than the life in the bush. They would rather be in the rebel camps where they are free to go and steal, loot, do whatever they want to, as opposed to staying in a concentrated camp where you have to be protected every day. You are surviving death every next moment. Houses being burnt every day. It became so tragic. But I formed a Peace Club primarily to discourage my friends from picking up the arms to fighting anybody. And I made a commitment with my parents that, my mother particularly, I told her, I said, we have made a choice. We are going to be peaceful. We'll never learn how to shoot guns. And up to now, I've never learned how to shoot a gun. And that was a commitment. And my mother said, great, let's not learn to kill anybody. What we can do is let us be peaceful. I know it's difficult, but it's not going to be forever. It will be over one day. Then came the build up on, what about education? We were so poor. We didn't even have a bicycle. Our family didn't even own a bicycle. My first time to wear shoes, I was 14 years.
Wow.
I didn't own shoes at all. And then when I went to start schooling, I studied primary one. I dropped out for 5 years because the war had intensified. And I just found it very difficult. I had to skip many classes to catch up. I went all the way to primary 5 when I resumed schooling after 5 years. But again, the problem was we didn't have money, not even to buy a pencil. I could drop out for a week because my parents couldn't afford to buy a pencil. This is how poor we were. But still, I told them that I want to study, I want to be part of this, I want to continue. And then all of a sudden, things kept on building. I had to cut trees, burning charcoal, charcoal, you cut big trees to burn, to raise, to sell money, use the money for paying yourself in school. So I paid myself in school. And that's why when you talk about Millennium Development Goal, the goals came in and bypassed us because we were caught up in conflict. We were in the camp, like majority of the world population were caught up in conflict. They missed the Millennium Development Goals. But it was so difficult. And then I continued to pursue. I paid myself in school through primary, secondary, and I got to where I am today. But above all, I've always asked myself when I was young, what would I do differently if I was a leader? Because I knew the life I was living was not the right life. And if I was to be in position of influence, how would I act in a way that will make people hear the voices of the people who have suffered? And the question of, if really it's about peace, whose peace? Is it for the government to say they are stable, they have peace and stability, yet people are suffering? Or for the people? If it's about people, then that should be my cause. So I continued pursuing my studies and all that, but I remained committed at the community level, dedicated to help people. And then 10 years ago, even before 10 years ago, I lost a family member. I went home with my brother, who was 2 years older than me. And from like a difference of 30 minutes apart, we got separated. I never saw him again. He was abducted together with my other family members, my cousin, and he never came back. And he's one of the over 50,000 people still missing in northern Uganda up to now. That gave me a bit of, I probably could have regretted why did I not pick up the gun? Why did I not learn how to shoot guns? Because I would have just grabbed a gun to go and rescue my brother. I knew it was difficult. It was the most difficult moment. But I continued. I said, well, he's gone. He will come back, maybe. We'll wait for him to come back. But most important, to protect the families, to support the families. And then I went on to form this organization 10 years ago called African Youth Initiative Network, which was purposely to help us reach out to talk about peace to the people in the camp, in the schools, the young people. And each time I went to the community to talk to young people, to talk to these communities affected by war in the IDP camps, they asked me, are you possessed? Why are you talking about peace that you have never lived? Why are you talking about peace that you have never experienced? Tell us one single day that you have lived in peace. My motivation for peace was seen as a betrayal because a lot of people thought I was discouraging the young people who could have sacrificed themselves to go and protect their communities, which I could understand the feelings of the community. But I also told them openly, said, well, we can be angry, we can be sad, we can all contemplate to pick up the gun to kill each other, but we can also make an effort to make sure that we bring to an end the cycles, the tragedies of suffering that we have seen for too long. And this is what I kept on. My message became very clear. And people started saying, we cannot talk about peace when you have bullets in our bodies, when you have women who are sexually abused, raped, they have never been able to recover. So what about that? And then that gave me a feeling that people's definition of peace is different from what I knew, what the government knew, what the UN knows. And that was the question, is how can we make peace and justice a reality to the people who have suffered?
Well, it's an amazing story, and you should be incredibly proud of the work that you have done. I mean, and you're such a young person that, I mean, you're going to be an inspiration for young people for generations to come, and it's an honor to spend time with you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I hope you've enjoyed our show. Until next time, I'm Kevin Quinn. Best wishes for good conversations from St. Norbert College.